We're here right? So okay. Well, thank you very much for coming out here. I'll get started here in just a second. I know Michelle wanted to get some introduction.
We just wanted to preface by saying I think you guys know who we are, and I'm Michelle Prince, the Director of Auxiliary Services. This is David Sedell, the Assistant Director of Parking. And we just wanted to thank you guys for coming and listening. This is something that has been thought about for quite a while now. We're probably in phase 3 of a multi-year process of analyzing parking, implementing some small changes along the way. As you saw this year with the booting process and the handicap bill registration process. And we have been asked to look at the parking system as a whole. We've put a lot of time and effort into looking at that and brought several options with the executive leadership team. And they have sort of at one point picked an option and asked us to look into it even deeper. And then they asked us to take what we found and bring it before some groups across campus like yourself. We'll be doing this folks here today. We've done several others with students. We'll be doing another one this coming Tuesday. And it's going out to be on the feed as well for faculty and folks to be able to look at it all throughout. And at the end, there'll be a survey that you'll be able to put your comments down on and let us know. And that's what we're looking to, is to get back all these comments and analyze those and prepare them to take back to the executive leadership team to just let them know what you guys think about it and what your comments are and how we can maybe make some changes to make it better, or to think about things that you might bring up that we had not thought about yet. That happens every time we present this, or something that's brought up that we had not thought about before. So that's what we're looking for, is your honest feedback, and we'll answer any question that you have.
Thank you very much. And again, I'm David, and if you have any questions throughout, I don't want to take any more time than you've allotted, and I greatly appreciate those of you that are able to come out and talk, and listen to the presentation and give feedback. Michelle forgot to mention, I'm in charge of the parking complement department, right? So we're a little slow this time of year, but maybe we can fix that. Compliments along the way. Okay, so this is our current plan. Most of you are quite familiar with it. We have our reserved lots and we have our general lots. If you have a reserve permit, it's good for your one reserved lot. And if for whatever reason you can't park in your one reserved lot today, you must go park out in general. You cannot park in any other reserved lots. Okay? So each reserved lot has its own capacity, and each reserved lot's capacity has to be managed separately. There's no fluidity between the different reserved lots. Okay? So if a whole bunch of violators get into your reserved lot that day, or something happens, there is no other area that you can park in outside of general. You can't just go park in another reserved lot. Excuse me. And so, of course, the general, if you've seen, especially in these last 2 weeks, the general lots get full very quickly, and the general permit holders get quite frustrated with not being able to find a convenient parking place. And most of them end up going out to Ingle once they circle around a lot of the general looking for a space. So we've done 3 utilization studies, and you can see here the numbers that you see are the available spaces at the indicated times. This is an average over each of those 3 weeks, just of Monday through Thursday. So we took out Friday numbers because we know Friday we have more available spaces than usual, so we didn't want that to skew our numbers. So this is Monday through Thursday available spaces. So as you can see, I'll try and get my mouse in here. For example, right during this week, on average at 11:30 in the morning, we had 677 available reserved spaces. Okay, and that, of course, is spread out throughout the campus. And when you think 677, that's a huge amount of empty spaces, right? Well, it's 20 spaces here, 30 spaces there in these different larger reserve lots. The negative number you see in the same little grouping, negative 31.25. So the negative numbers are vehicles that we counted in our survey, in our utilization study, vehicles that were parked on the grass or parked outside, just parked everywhere, right? But we wanted to make sure we included those because we have to make sure we have spaces available for them if we're finding a solution to fix it. So on average, there were, just over 31 vehicles parked all over the place, right? And so every general space was filled, and there were 31 vehicles that were parked in the grass and making their own space. And that's for the general lots. Now you can see right below that, that's 52.75, and again, I'm just taking this one block here, but if all of those 32 people, and our data showed at any point during this time, if the individuals that made their own spot and parked down at Engle, they would have found a spot. But we know that with a growing university, Engle's not going to last forever. We need to find a better solution and really go after a more efficient solution to making sure that those 677 spaces, for example, are not just sitting there empty, frustrating the student populace and faculty and staff that park in general as well. One of the most frustrating calls that I've gotten, especially these last 2 weeks and last semester in the spring and fall when we did the study, somebody will call me and they say, I've just been circling around for 45 minutes or 2 hours in general, and I couldn't find a single space. And then I walk into the middle of campus, and I have to walk through all of these empty spaces that are sitting in reserve that I'm not allowed to use. And the reason that these spaces are sitting empty, we can only sell a certain number of reserve permits, right, so that we can honor that reserve system for each individual lot. And we have a certain cap for the number of spaces or, ratio of spaces to permits so that we can ensure that those reserve spaces are available. But if a large group of people decided they didn't want to come to class that day, or, they're sick, they stayed home, they didn't go to work, those spaces sit empty and nobody can use them, and the general parkers are still circling around and around and around. Does anybody have any questions about our lot utilization? Yes.
Do you have a lot by lot information?
Yes.
Because
Yes, I do.
swear there's never any empty spaces in our reserve lot.
And again, this was the campus as a whole.
Just curious.
Definitely. We did this lot by lot and time by time. Spreadsheet's huge. We got down to averages here to really show that the trend did, from day to day, the trend followed our averages here, that there are spaces available. Now, you can see this was, first, second week of September, and then about the last week of September. So we know, first couple weeks of the fall semester especially, it's crazy, it's chaos. A lot of people parking in lots that don't have permits, they don't belong in there. It's where enforcement comes in. And so we know that, and again, this fall we're going to be doing these utilization studies again. We're going to start next week and then at the end of September as well, just to make sure our numbers are consistent. But yes, we went lot by lot, recorded it, and took our numbers from the big spreadsheet. Okay, so this was a survey that we did in spring of 2016. This was for the entire student body and faculty and staff, and we had a very large response rate from it. So not particularly proud of it, but we want to let people know, right? So survey results, level of satisfaction, it's not great. In fact, we can see most people that took the survey are not satisfied with the parking on campus. So in finding a place to park, it's pretty spread, but there's too many individuals for our liking that it took more than 10 minutes for them to find a parking space. So that's another thing that we're looking to fix. Okay, a huge trend that we saw, UTC should provide designated lots for commuter students. Very, very strong response rate for in agreement with that statement. And then again, very strong response rate for faculty and staff having some designated areas for parking. Okay, so this is our new plan here. It's broken down into 4 different categories of parking. Okay, we have our commuter parking, which is for non-residential students, faculty, and staff. So the majority of faculty and staff are going to be parking in commuter parking. It is a first come, first serve type of thing, but there's a lot of it, and we'll get to the map here in just a minute. We have housing, so we have housing parking, so these are dedicated spaces for residential students. This allows us to have the residential students park as close to their residential areas as possible, removing them from the core areas of campus where commuters are coming in to get closer to their classrooms. It also allows us to utilize the parking around the residential areas as efficiently as possible so that the residential students, when they come back to where they're living, we know that they're going to have parking available to them. And that's extremely important to us for safety and many other reasons. We also have reserved, so it'll be similar to the reserved lots that we have now with the reserved, and however, it'll be just for faculty and staff. If you get a reserve permit, this will not be available to students, and there's going to be a lot fewer reserve than what we have now. And again, the more reserve that we have, the less efficient that it is. So if somebody with a reserve permit doesn't show up that day, the space will sit empty. Events, so the last category is event parking. So if you have a commuter parking permit, right, or blue parking permit here, for all practical purposes, this event parking is commuter parking. It is available to commuters throughout the year, except for the times that we do have large events that we need to shut down lots. So people won't be kicked out of their one individual assigned lot. They'll know ahead of time, okay, this is an event lot, but I've checked the parking website, it's going to be open today. And so I know as a commuter I can park in this lot today. Does anybody have any questions before we go to the map? All right, we go straight into the map here. So to orient, the blue are the commuter parking lots. The gold are the residential parking lots. The bright green, I'm not sure if it shows up well in there, but the bright green are the reserved lots for faculty and staff. And the red lots are the event lots, which again, these are really commuter lots until we have a large UC event or a large arena event that we need to dedicate some of those spaces towards those events. In the top right of your screen, you can see our permit sales for last fall. So these are broken down to faculty, staff, commuter students, and housing students. And in the bottom right portion of your screen, you can see the number of physical spaces that are allocated to each different type of parking. Okay, does anybody have any questions at this point? I can go into some more detail. Yes?
Where's the visitor special guest parking?
So, you may not be able to show up so terribly well, but lot 7, it will be dedicated as visitor parking. So we have a lot of orientations and tours and whatnot. So lot 7, along with some portion of the bottom floor of the Fifth Street Garage, will be dedicated for visitor parking. And also a portion of lot 58 near the MAP building. The Chancellor's office, well, the ELT team let us know that that's an area that they would like to see some visitor parking because there's a lot of events that happen at the MAP building, especially going in the future with different departments that are going to be moving in there. So they wanted to see some special guest parking in that area. It's a lot to take in, so definitely look at it for a few minutes. But one thing I really want to stress here is that our new parking system is going to be extremely data-driven. And what I mean by that is it's extremely flexible, okay? So commuters, and I may not have explained this real quick, but the commuter parking, the blue parking is fluid. The housing parking is also fluid, but you cannot cross housing and commuter, okay? So if you have a commuter permit, you can park in any blue lot on campus, okay? And also any red lot if there's no events. If you have a gold residential permit, you can park in any gold parking lot on campus, but you cannot cross it. So by data-driven, what I mean is looking at our permit sales. So if we find, and you can see here we have 2,467 spaces dedicated for housing or residential parking. If we find that we've only sold 1,000 or 1,500 housing permits, we're not going to leave 2,400 spaces available just sitting empty. At any point that we need to, that our data shows, we can switch these commuter lots into housing lots, or we can switch housing lots into commuter lots with very little effort, just updating signage, updating the map, and sending notice out to the community. So that way, if we find more people are buying commuter permits, let's increase our commuter parking. More people are buying the housing permits, we can switch it out to housing. Using data, we can most efficiently use the spaces that we have so that we don't have those 677 spaces that are just sitting there empty, frustrating the whole community.
So
Yes.
in order to get the housing parking for students, before you would do a readjustment, would they have to be an on-campus student?
Yes, so only residential students will be able to purchase the residential permits. And residential students would not be able to purchase commuter permits. Yes.
When you talk about, changing it, is that like at a semester time, or is that at a new year? Or is it just our data in the last 2 months shows that no one's parking, or we have over, not enough commuter sales? I mean, when would you, like, say, this lot's now a commuter lot, or this now is now whatever?
So it's going to take a lot of coordination, especially with the housing department and various getting that data. But if we know 2 weeks into the semester that we're not getting any more residential students and we can see our permit sales, individuals just have not purchased permits, then at that point we can switch it up. It won't be, what is this lot this week? It won't be that fluid, but it'll be, using it as efficiently as we can for that semester. So I don't anticipate halfway through the semester we'll be switching lots once everybody's used to, unless we're seeing a real need for it. But mostly once our permit sales are solidified by, second or third week of August, and we can see, okay, safely we can make sure that, we can see these spaces are sitting empty. Let's go ahead and switch them back over to where they need to be. Yes.
I see that one of the reserve lots around Fletcher Hall is an 8 to 5. Did you all give any kind of consideration to, because that other one I think is more reserved.
This one here?
That number 1, I think it is, that's on the north, that side, the north side of Fletcher Hall. That's really little, and I don't think that.
So lot 1 is labeled as reserved for those that have the sign, the executive team that have their sign.
So
But
those of us who, wouldn't be allowed to park in that area.
sure,
Having a reserve and the only option nearby being an 8 to 5 lot is.
sure, and we can definitely, again, extremely fluid. So if we're getting feedback that this lot is not working before we start selling permits for this lot, we can have this lot be the reserved and this one be the
I
commuter.
think they're both 8 to 5, aren't they?
This one is not 8 to 5.
Oh, it isn't?
It is not.
Okay, doesn't, I just
Definitely.
know like everybody in my office works past 5 o'clock.
Sure.
There's,
Definitely.
so,
And again, this is a lot. This is not solidified, set in stone. This is an example of where we can strategically place these. If we have nobody interested in buying a reserve, we'll just turn this back over to commuter, right? But definitely, I definitely understand about the 8 to 5 restriction. We can make this one over here the reserved and make this one the commuter. Definitely very flexible.
no, you're right, pricing might be the factor here.
Yes.
So reserve lot right there on the corner of Douglas and 8th,
Yes.
is that a new lot?
This is a new lot that'll be coming online. We have secured a lease with the church here. This one would be a time-restricted lot as well, though, because it is, excuse me, it is a lease with the church that they've put in the time restrictions of. But it is a new lot.
Yeah, I would say if you're gonna have both on that side of campus, both 8 to 5,
Yeah.
you
Sure,
got nothing on that side of campus then.
definitely,
For those of us that work crazy hours.
definitely.
There's
Good
some-
feedback, I appreciate it.
And there are restrictions at 8 to 5, but, in reality, on, for example, 24, that church, Wednesday night is the only
I've had a
time.
ticket a couple times,
They're
so
real,
I think they're too late. But,
And, and we do try, and the church is in full agreement to not have you guys get ticketed. We're not here after 5, so if you need to do it or whatever, so we do take care of those citations when that happens. And also like with that church, again, the First Baptist Church, we say 8 to 5, but I don't even think they had a Wednesday night service because they thought we were restrictive on that. It just cannot be a housing lot because they're there 24/7.
I just think we all get the phone calls though of, oh my gosh, everything's 8 to 5 on this side of campus. But-
Definitely.
Right.
Thank you. I know you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, and I apologize if this is a stupid question, but.
No such thing.
Well, is the faculty, staff parking, are we allowed to park as well in the community lots and all the other lots?
No. So with the faculty staff, what these faculty staff lots are primarily used for, and this was a lot of feedback from the executive leadership team, is there's a lot of faculty and staff that need quick access to their office because they've got to grab some materials and then go off campus to do recruiting or other various things. So these are primarily going to be used for, this is where my office is, this is the only place that I'm going to park. And the vast majority of faculty and staff are not going to be parking in those reserved areas. Most faculty and staff are going to be parking in the commuter lots.
But it's a choice.
How are you?
Correct. You don't have to purchase a faculty staff. You have the option to purchase a faculty staff if you want to, as long as we still have them available.
It's just you can't cross lots anymore.
With the faculty staff, you cannot cross lots. With the commuter, you can go park in any blue commuter space or event space if there's no event that you need to.
And residential cannot park in commuters, right?
Correct. Residential cannot park in commuter, and commuter cannot park in residential. Excuse me. So that way we know with the residential vehicles, they're not leaving their residential areas, go parking in the commuter areas for the day, right, while their residential spaces stay empty, and then coming back in the evening, their vehicles would be staying near the residential areas.
And believe it or not, you'd be surprised how often that happens. A lot of your spaces on this side of campus are generals, that the commuter students are having problems getting into, is taken up by, for example, South Campus residents that have got in their vehicles and crossed over here and got in the general lots just to go to class in the morning. And that is causes a capacity issue along with many other reasons for students who are trying to get in their general lot. And then there's that space just sitting in. So, that's our goal, is why you feel that there's, restrictions. So you buy a faculty staff lot and you stay in that lot. You use the shuttle if you need to go to other parts of campus, because for capacity reasons, you don't need to be over in a commuter area and then your faculty staff area is just sitting there empty, whatever. But folks that have the general spaces are having such a difficult time trying to find a general space. Just go to
Any other questions?
Was there any thought to, maybe 2 levels of commuter? Because faculty and staff are considered commuter, but staff are here 8 to 5 every day. Whereas faculty might come in for a few hours each day, and students certainly aren't here every day, 5 either. But just giving us some, some sort of a, not priority, but, being able to designate a space there so that with those, there won't be empty spaces, because for the most part, we're here every day.
Sure. So we looked at probably 12 or 13 different models, especially based off of other universities and the way they do it. So our campus is laid out a little bit funky, to where the more layers that we put in our commuter parking, we would have to add those layers all around campus in order to accommodate, I'm a faculty member over here, but there's no faculty parking on this side of campus, kind of like we were just talking with the 8 to 5. So the more layers that we put into the commuter, a lot less efficiency that we have, so those spaces could be sitting open, and then a lot more complicated in trying to find spaces surrounding campus because we're so spread out within this one campus. Many universities that are more central, they have sort of the ring system. So, the first band of parking is, staff, and then the outer, the next one is faculty, or, for example, and then the very outer one is, your commuter student parking. But with the state office building, with the MAP building, with whole departments moving, being complete opposite ends of campus, we lose a lot of efficiency anytime we try to put layers into the commuter parking. But definitely, I do understand what we're talking about here. Yes.
The current library garage right there, you have it separated between two.
So the map isn't quite in coordination with it, but the bottom half, the left half, the green half is lot 11, which is underneath, and then lot 12, which is to the right, is the one that's kind of in the middle, and then the gold, which is shown on the map as below it, is actually the third layer on top, which is lot 13. So in this example, we have faculty staff parking on the bottom. We have commuter parking, which is also faculty staff and commuter students in that middle level 12, and then the top is residential. It's a lot to take in because it's, again, a complete system change. So racking brains on how this would affect our individual operations. Definitely feedback that we're looking for. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to pricing? Yes.
So the top is number of faculty and staff not reserved passes.
Just plain faculty staff that bought permits. Period.
How many reserved passes did we sell last year? Or in comparison? Because at the bottom you're comparing number of spaces and basically passes that you're going to sell.
Yes.
So it's a comparison to number of passes sold previously in that category, so it kind of breaks out.
Sure. I don't have right offhand, right off memory, what it is. I know the majority of faculty and staff bought reserved.
Yeah.
Than bought general, but we did have a good chunk that did buy general.
Yeah. So that's what I'm looking at is how big is the difference is that number from the number of copies? Pretty huge difference looking at that.
It is a large difference, and we do expect that the majority of faculty and staff are going to park in commuter. Mostly, when we get to the pricing, we'll look at that. And then, also, we're really trying to limit the number of reserve lots that we have, period, because we have a reserve system now, and again, it's extremely inefficient. So the fewer reserve lots that we have, the more that we can say, I know that these spaces are not going to be sitting empty, while students, faculty, and staff are driving around looking for parking spaces.
So the permits, like right now, technically, permits don't matter after 5. Generally, is that still going to be the same model, or?
I anticipate that in commuter, especially, it would be not waiting after 5. We had talked about in the residential areas, possibly working with the police department or extending our enforcement hours just to make sure they have their spaces when they get back to their resident areas. But commuter, for sure, we anticipate after 5, we wouldn't be checking permits. Okay, any further questions?
If, just keep in the back of your head, that if that were to change, the College of Business, the master's program is all evening, so anything after 5 o'clock, we would really need to know so we could warn the students if they have to do some. They'd be parking in 26, which is designated as commuter, but if that were to change, we want to give students that heads up,
Yeah, and this is again, so for fall 2018, any changes that we make will be welcome. There won't be any overnight, this week it was after 5, and next week, we're going to be ticketing. Definitely not any quick changeover of policy.
There has not been any discussion to this point of that being part of that fall of 18 plan.
Part of me kind of hope it would be long term. I mean,
it has been discussed.
Yeah,
It
because
has been mentioned because
that's a
it's
huge population of students that
very, very common.
get by without
Sure.
having to park. So if you can arrange your schedule where it's all late afternoon, evening classes, your odds of having to.
Sure. But again, it is supply and demand kind of thing, because we know after 5, the campus empties for the most part. The last couple of weeks has been a little bit more than usual. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay, so let's look at our pricing. So at the top we have our proposed pricing for fall of 2018. At the bottom we have our current pricing. So faculty and staff for commuter, it would be $300 annually, which is cheaper than our current reserve, and it's a little bit more expensive than our current general. So that would come out to, I didn't put the monthly on here, that would come out to $25 a month for the commuter pricing. The reserve lot pricing, again, making sure that we're as close to 1-to-1 for those reserve lots, and then if they do stay empty, then nobody can use them. We've limited the number of those that can be possible for. So those are sitting at $600 annually, which comes out to $50 a month. Does anybody have any question on the pricing? Yes.
Given that faculty and staff will be competing for the same spaces for commuter lots as the students, why are we being penalized by paying more money parking the same space?
So you actually pay more money now, and the logic behind that, from my understanding, is before my time, was students pay a transportation fee that faculty and staff do not pay. And so one of the agreements when long time ago was that faculty and staff would have to pay a little bit more for their permits in order to compensate for that.
It's no different than what happens right now. The students pay a transportation fee built into the cost of their fees in Banner. They have a separate line item that's a transportation fee, and the only way they would agree to that, the ratio and all that at that time, was that if faculty staff had to pay that same type of transportation fee. And since we don't have charges that go into Banner and all, we had to increase the price. So that's been that way for the last 4 or 5 years.
Does anybody have any questions before I move on pricing? Yes.
South Campus, when you say for current, that's really the residential South Campus parking. Is there
Yes.
just other parking on South Campus?
Yeah, so those are the residential students that live in South Campus.
Okay.
The actual South Campus permit, they'll let you park in any of 47 lots.
Does that do away with the 24-hour reserve lots? Is this new plan?
Yes, so we would not have any 24-hour reserved as a separate pricing tier.
There's only one now, that lot 21, that's in that 24-hour reserve pricing structure that was set up 20 years ago. So that was there, all the reserve lots, which are being all the same pricing structure.
You don't have any event pricing on here.
So the event permits are not, so the event lots are commuter lots. So those, if you have a commuter permit, you can park in any event lot, and then when an event is shut down, whatever department or whoever is renting out that lot for the arena event or the UC event would be paying for the spaces that they're renting. So it's not a separate permit, it's
Same price, just, okay.
right. So it is commuter parking, but we're letting you know that we may shut down these lots if an event comes on campus. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? Yes.
The family, how is that, what is that rated as, what kind of a parking spot?
Do you mean Engle?
And Engle?
Engle, I mean, sorry.
Yes, so Engle is just part of the commuter system, correct? Because we do have shuttles that service, the commuter lots, including the Engle. Okay, I'll move on unless we have any more questions. And again, if you have any feedback, we definitely like feedback about anything we talked about today. So some enforcement changes, and I'm almost through the presentation. I appreciate your time here. So some quick enforcement changes. Semantics, we're changing. If you get a ticket instead of what the verbiage is now, 10 class days, we're gonna change that verbiage to 14 calendar days. A lot of confusion with some students, well, I didn't have class this day, so it didn't count my 10 class days. I'm sure you can imagine. So just to make everything more clear, 14 calendar days. So after those 14 calendar days, the ticket becomes late. Once you have a late ticket, it cannot be appealed, which is what we have now. That's not a change. But it will also incur a 50% penalty. Okay? So really, and I know that seems really harsh and steep, one of the main things that we're trying to fix with this and with other enforcement actions is we have students that like to get a whole bunch of tickets, and they know that they don't have to deal with it until the end of the semester because that's when the hold is actually effective, right? So then at the end of the semester, they've got $800 in tickets, and they come to our office, and they're like, I can't be a student anymore because I forgot I had all these tickets. So penalty, we want people to have in their mind, okay, I have to take care of this within 14 days or my problem's going to get worse. Okay, and then, so with our current system of holds, it's all electronic, so if you get a ticket, within 30 seconds in our system, you've got a financial hold on your account, okay? So one thing we wanted to change is giving people those 14 days to deal with their ticket, either pay or appeal it without any penalty, right? So no hold on their account until after they've neglected to pay or appeal it. That way, we can tell them, look, you've had 14 days here. We did not put a hold on your account. We didn't, you had 14 days to pay or appeal it before any, any action was taken against it. The hold also, if the citation is under appeal, they would not have a financial hold on their account while we wait for the various boards to adjudicate the ticket. So really, definitely a little bit more student-friendly and not immediately penalizing them, especially if, for whatever reason, the student board would have gotten rid of the ticket. Well, we penalized them during this whole process. We don't want to do that. If we're letting them appeal it, we're not going to put a hold on them until everything's said and done, and they've been found responsible for the ticket. Any question on enforcement changes? Okay. We're also going to be increasing the parking fine. We're not going crazy. Most of the fines are going to be increased from $25 to $30. The one major change here, displaying a stolen or counterfeit permit. We've got a lot of graphics art students that like to make their own permits, and then we have to get the dean's office involved, and the student conduct, it's a whole mess. So we really want to discourage people from doing that, stealing from the university, but also if they think, well, park on the grass is a $25 ticket, falsifying my own permit is a $25 ticket, which one would you choose? Now, we want to make sure that they know not acceptable. You can't forge a parking permit. The only other change would be the immobilization fee would go from $20 to $50 to put a boot on your vehicle.
Dave,
Yes.
I can't remember, but how long, is this just the start right now with booting? I can't remember, when did you guys start it?
Yes, so we started warning some vehicles that they would receive boots near the end of the summer. We've actually started putting boots on vehicles at the beginning of the semester.
So it's only been a week and a half. Are people getting boots already?
Yes.
I'm not laughing at you.
No, it's just the reality of it. The individuals like to, and again, that's part of our capacity issue is we have individuals that, one, they haven't bought a permit, so we don't have them in our data. We don't know that they're looking for parking. And then they're taking up a parking space that we had allocated for a permit that had purchased. So we like booting for many reasons. I know we talked with the various groups earlier this year about our booting process.
Is
Yes.
there a fee for, I know the handicap thing came into effect, where you have to purchase a UTC handicap?
Yes.
What is if you find somebody that's, how do you find that? Like somebody has a handicap, they don't have the UTC handicapped, can you figure that out?
So in our current system,
Yeah.
so with our disability policy, you have to both display your state issued permit or your state issued license plate and a UTC permit. If you do not have the state issued permit displayed, it's the automatic $200 fine, right? So we don't play with people that park in there that aren't supposed to be in there. If you have your state issued disability permit, but you don't have a UTC permit, we issue 3 warnings with descriptions on, hey, this is a new policy. We want to let you know, before we do any other action. And after those 3 warnings, then they would start incurring the $25 fines.
What if I break my leg and I'm on crutches for 3 months?
You would need to get a note from your doctor and visit the bursar's office, and we have a temporary disability permit process.
And if you already have a temporary handicap, then you're covered. That's not, you still need to get that spot, but you wouldn't need the note from the doctor.
Right, if you're registered with the state, either with a red temporary disability or a permanent blue, then we don't require a doctor's note after that.
How about the larger buildings on campus that have, host different outside organizations? Like Fletcher Hall, we have quite a few outside organizations that use our bigger rooms, for different things on Fridays and, a
Or
lot
event
in the
parking.
summer, but a lot of times on Fridays. How does that all work with that parking and I'm assuming that they're gonna be put into the commuter lot, or what are they, what are those people told?
Sure, and so visitor parking and event parking is something that is gonna need to be completely revamped. And we're kind of trying to get the foundations of our new system here. But what it's gonna require is working very closely with the various departments on campus to make sure that parking is one of the first things that we think about when we have an event on campus, instead of it's a week out and, I forgot to arrange parking kind of thing. So in working with the various departments, again, with this plan, we have a lot of flexibility. If we know that it's a one-time event, right, we may be able to, looking at our data again, we may be able to allocate a certain number of commuter spaces for that event instead of shutting down a whole large event lot, right, for that event. So again, it's very flexible, and we're not kicking out people out of their one individual assigned lot, because these commuter lots are very fluid. I know people get into a routine of, I park in this one commuter lot, right? But instead of saying right now with your reserve lots, if we had to shut it down for some reason, saying, well, go find a parking space in general because you cannot park in any other reserve lot. We can say, look at all these commuter parking lots that we have for this day, where you're going to need to find a different space that we have allocated all around campus. But it was a long answer to a short question, but just really working with the departments to make sure that we can accommodate any event that comes on campus or any visitor that comes on the campus is definitely something we want to do. Let's scoot back up here. Okay, so did anybody have any other questions? I think I had just there's my questions. It's official now. We have a question slide.
I guess piggybacking off of what Tanya asked earlier, the discrepancy between the number of faculty staff permits that were sold in 2016 and what the number that you envision, spaces you envision releasing for 2018. How is that going to work for those folks that now have reserved lots that are used to getting their big cow coming through campus mail each August? Are some people going to be left out and have to purchase the commuter permit?
So, in order to, again, make it as efficient as possible, we will have to limit the number of faculty staff reserve lots that we have. I suspect with the difference in pricing that the majority of individuals that have a reserve permit now would probably opt for the commuter parking. Just looking at the map, most of the commuter parking that we have is very close to the areas that faculty and staff are going to want to park in.
And they're currently reserved lots. So like you look at 10, I think that is, that's a reserve lot right now, and so that will just go to commuter, and people who already park there if they want to, but it'll be much cheaper than what they're paying.
It's cheaper than they're currently paying. Also, faculty and staff have an advantage over students that we typically, most of us get here between 7 and 9 in the morning, 7 and 9:30, before all of our parking lots start to really fill up with commuter students getting here. Most of the commuter students we find get here around, between 10, 10:30, 11. So I anticipate that in the mornings, a lot of your more central commuter parking is going to be utilized more heavily by faculty and staff, and then as the commuters are coming in a little bit later for their mid-morning or afternoon classes, they'll be parking a little bit more outside because the inner spaces are not going to be available.
So when do you see starting to sell decals for the fall?
So
People deciding which lot, if they want to remain there, change lots.
So with this plan, if the executive leadership team gave it the green light and we can move forward with it, I can tell you the first year that we do this, I promise you, and not to have any expectations, there will be some growing pains in trying to assess who wants to buy a reserve permit, who's fine with buying a commuter permit. But we will have a system that's equitable, making sure that that those that are interested at least either get the permit that they're looking for or get on a wait list. But it'll be well communicated to the community. It won't be, you have to stop by David's office to get a reserve permit or something. It'll be, everything will be online, and it'll be, again, well communicated to you ahead of time.
I just want to say that I want to point out that a lot of our staff do not use computers during the day, specifically our custodial staff and our outdoor staff facilities. So having something online is not actually a good option for them. So they need to have an option where they can sign up when they check in the morning to sign up for their parking. Because whenever we do stuff that's online, that's not something that's helpful for them.
Sure.
They don't sit at a computer all day.
And so one of the things that we've already discussed is at least for the first year, getting a feel for how many people will even be interested in a reserve permit. So if we find, there's not that many people interested compared to the ones that want to buy a commuter, we can definitely find the easiest solution to making sure they can purchase that permit or get registered for payroll deduction or, whatever their needs are. Yes.
I currently have a reserves permit, but I also have a motor scooter that I ride for triple days. So currently I get a reserves permit and I get a motor scooter permit. How does that work? And motorcycle, how does that, is it going to work the same?
So we haven't completely solidified the motorcycle, but one thing that we are looking at changing is right now if you have a motorcycle, you have to buy it at the reserve permit rate, right, in order to get a motorcycle permit. So we are looking at making sure that motorcycle permit, we want to encourage motorcyclists to bring their vehicles onto campus. If they're smaller, we can pack them more into dedicated motorcycle areas. But we will have separate motorcycle parking permits for the motorcycles instead of them being directly linked to a reserve permit right now. It may be, and again, we haven't solidified it, I won't promise one way or another. It may be if you buy a commuter, you can get a free motorcycle. It may be that it's a separate purchase. We'll definitely be looking at that once we get the foundations, kind of moving forward from there. But motorcycles is something that we right now don't have a whole lot of accommodations for. We don't have very many dedicated motorcycle parking spaces. So that's something we really want to improve to encourage people to not be driving large vehicles that take up a 9x18 space and to bring a motorcycle that we can fit, 2-3 with dedicated parking spaces.
Well, it's nice right now in that you guys are pretty lenient in that if I can slide my motorcycle into a spot that's not an actual parking place, but I'm not obstructing anything, I don't get a ticket.
Sure.
I'm not taking up a spot and I don't get a ticket. That's it's kind of nice.
And that's what, that's what we're gonna be looking at, is taking up some of that dead space, the legal dead space, with designated motorcycle parking.
Marking it off.
Marking it off that.
Because technically, right, so I know you mentioned leniency. Technically, if a UTC police officer decided that one motorcycle is in the way or obstructing or something, that would be up to their discretion. I know there's a lot of leniency right now because there's not many dedicated. But we would be looking, again, efficiency. Some of these dead spaces that we know we can't fit a car in there, let's put some, half marks in there for the motorcycles.
So I don't know what's going on with the West Campus housing project, but with the whole hall renovation, the contractors are taking up about 20 to 25 spots in the whole hall parking lot right now. And I don't even know if they have parking passes. It's just marked off. It says contractor parking.
Right. So they purchased about 16 spaces for that project.
So that's my question is, will that be handled the same way, especially with this change and how things are?
So again, that's another detail we haven't completely hammered out. There are some projects that facilities come to us and says we have to have this lay down area, otherwise we can't do the project. Other times it's more convenient if our people can park here, right? So there's some things that we can look at to make sure that whatever areas are marked off are being used for, as efficiently as possible, either for essential to the project or, we can give an alternative site that's.
So I think my
not
concern is if it
convenience.
would affect a reserve lot, because one, those people are paying a premium
Yes.
for parking, and also they're smaller lots, and there's not
Right.
choices. They can't go anywhere else. I mean, you told me you can't cross, so they can't go to commuters. So if they show up and half that lot's shut down for 2 weeks or something.
That would not be acceptable. So these reserve lots are going to be baby, for a better lack of a, very close to 1-to-1, so that with the amount of money you're paying, right, we're figuring this in, you're going to have your space available. They're going to be heavily enforced, making sure that, with people that like to park where they're not supposed to, we can't little asterisk guarantee it, but as much as we can do to make sure that because you're paying that amount of money that those spaces are available, they're not going to be taken offline, at least without a very convenient alternative, for again, the amount of money that we're talking about for those.
So did you say that there was gonna be something that went out to ask faculty and staff, showing the difference in pricing? Would you be interested in purchasing this reserve, faculty staff reserve? Because
Oh, definitely. Yeah, so if this is adopted, we want to get that data as far in advance as we can. So, even in beginning of spring semester, if this is adopted and this is where, the upper echelon is saying this is where the direction we're going, we want to get that data as much as possible so we can, one, find out if people are interested in reserve permit. Again, this map isn't solidified, so where, if we had a small dedicated reserve lot, there might be a set of choices, or, just where is your building located that would be convenient for you to park. We want that data as soon as possible.
Just a random thought that I had, with Douglas Heights and the new one on the other side that are not campus housing, but campus housing.
Sure.
They're those are gonna have commuter spots. And so then I see all of those commuter, those ends of campus being filled up by students that
In this
live
area,
on campus but don't live on campus, that area, and then down where Douglas Heights is. Just curious if that conversation has happened about what,
sure. So
That-
one,
it's a residential population, but it's not truly, and I get that, but they are a residential population.
very close.
So, yeah, I don't know if there had been any discussion about treating of that population.
So
It's like if
one-
your address is within the 2 blocks of downtown, you cannot buy a parking pass. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I
Sure.
mean, it's, I can just see not being able to have a parking place there if they buy a commuter pass, which is fine, allowed to, but then I also see a shift happening of those being always full.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly where we're going. So, again, a detail that hadn't been solidified. There had been some discussion on, if, like you mentioned, what other universities do. If you're within the certain area, then either you have to buy a residential permit, or you're not allowed to buy a permit, period. That's something that definitely is going to be part of the discussion after we get the framework of, the base system. Because we don't want to disadvantage our residential students on campus, and we also don't want, the main thing is not to have these commuter parking spaces be utilized by individuals that are just leaving their car there 24/7. That defeats the purpose of the commuter designation. And it could be that, and again, not solidified, but it could be that in commuter, you're not allowed to leave your vehicle there overnight, or, so we can find ways to make sure that people aren't taking advantage of the system. Thank you very much. Okay,
I could
does
see
anybody
more of
have,
those
yes?
students hopping in their car and driving to the other side of campus, and like if they're a biology student and they live in Douglas Heights, they're probably going over to that side of campus and probably using, driving instead of walking.
Or taking a shuttle, or,
Yeah, I'm thinking those of us that get here at 7, I was like, okay, so if I have to, because I have a reserve now, so if I end up going and I'm only parked 24, so I'm gonna have to make a choice. I'm not gonna stay in my lot or go to something else. And so if Douglas Heights, though, was taking all the commuter ones on that end of campus, when I come in at 7, they're already on full.
sure.
And so that's what I'm trying to
And
think
that,
about in my head is,
again, that directly
Yeah.
defeats what
Yeah.
we're trying to do with the commuter.
right,
We're trying to keep, commuter open for people that are coming outside, coming in, and not necessarily within a mile of campus, coming in. Definitely a valid concern that we, what we look
not that I have a solution, it's just a,
I think with that also, it also depends. I've heard that Douglas Heights and other areas, when they have their own separate parking, they charge for that parking as well.
Yes.
It's additional to their rent. So we may not have a lot of students, depending on what they charge them.
Yeah.
They'll buy either they'll buy
there.
our pass, or they'll just pay for their own pass.
Sure.
I don't
And
think
they
they
just
get
leaving
both
it.
unless maybe.
But if our pricing is better than theirs, we might end up getting more of them.
Or vice versa, I don't know.
Right.
That would be.
Definitely something to consider, sure. Any other questions before we wrap things up? Okay, thank you very much for coming here and listening.